book launch series that we organize under the Political Science Association's Turkish Politics Specialist Group. My name is Buğra Güngör. I'm serving as the co-chair of our specialist group, and I will be moderating the conversation today. I'm collaborating with Dr. Begüm Zorlu, Dr. Zeki Sarigil, and Dr. Özlem Kayhan Pusane to organize the activities of our specialist group. I'd like to inform you that this event is being recorded. However, we will end the recording when we switch to the Q&A. The book launch event will be based on Dr. Zeki Sarigil's latest book titled How Informal Institutions Matter, Evidence from Turkish Social and Political Spheres, published in 2023, last year, by the University of Michigan Press. At this point, I'd like to share with you a short bio of Dr. Sarigil. Zeki Sarigil is an associate professor of political science at Bilkent University in Ankara, Turkey. He received his PhD from the Department of Political Science at the University of Pittsburgh in 2007. His research interests include ethnicity, ethno-nationalism, ethnic conflict, institutional theory, including institutional change, path dependence, and informal institutions, civil-military relations, religion and politics, Turkish politics, and Kurdish ethnopolitics. He has published articles in prestigious journals such as European Political Science Review, European Sociological Review, JPR, Journal of Peace Research, European Journal of International Relations, Nations and Nationalism, Ethnic and Racial Studies, Armed Forces and Society, South European Society and Politics, Mediterranean Politics, and Turkish Politics. Dr. Sarigil has received scholarships, grants, awards from various institutions, including Fulbright, TÜBİTAK, and the Science Academy of Turkey. He spent the 2014-2015 academic year at Princeton University as Fulbright visiting scholar. Finally, other than his book that we will discuss today, he has another book titled Ethnic Boundaries in Turkish Politics, the Secular Kurdish Movement and Islam, which was published in 2018 by New York University Press. In this event, we will also have two discussants, Dr. Digdem Soyaltin Colella, who is a lecturer or an assistant professor of politics and public policy at the University of Aberdeen in the UK. And we will have Dr. Şebnem Yardimci-Geyikçi, who is a research associate at the University of Bonn's Institute for Science and Ethics in Germany. They kindly agreed to discuss Dr. Sarigil's brand new book. Here is the plan. The first 15 minutes will be devoted to Dr. Sarigil's presentation. It will be followed by discussants' comments in 20 minutes, 10 minutes per discussant. Respectively, Dr. Yardimci-Geyikçi and Dr. Soyaltin Colella will talk. Next, Dr. Sarigil will have around 5 minutes to respond to those comments, to address these comments, some of these comments. In the last 15 minutes of the event, we will open the floor for Q&A. Therefore, we aim to finish our book launch in 1 hour. Without further ado, Dr. Sarigil, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Buğra. Many thanks for organizing this event, and also I would like to thank both of our valuable discussants. So I'm looking forward to their comments and criticisms. Maybe they might be helpful for future studies on informal institutions. So I really appreciate their time and efforts. And also many thanks for the participants for assigning their time for our event today. So let me just start sharing. I have some slides I want to share. Let's see. Not this. No, not this one. Let me do that again. Okay, now I will. Oh, now it's coming now. its connection is slow, or if we have a connection problem, maybe. Okay, I hope now you can see the slides, right?
Yes, hocam. It's
Okay.
perfectly fine with us.
I guess there's a connection problem, but okay. All right. So let me, yeah, this is the title. This is the cover page of the book, and I want to just start with some motivations behind this project. So I thought maybe I should show you like quick videos, but I guess to save time, maybe let me just try. Like this is really short. I don't know if it will work. Connection is, yeah, for some reason. Anyway, I guess we have a connection problem there, but anyway, so I just wanted to show you two videos. So I can briefly summarize. So in the first one, the very famous statement by Erdogan during his visit to Hatay during the for the anniversary of the first anniversary of the February 2023 earthquakes, very tragic events. So probably many of you had watched or heard his statements. He said something like, I'm just summarizing, said that, I mean, the central government and local government should be in cooperation, in harmony, so that that you can receive service, right, public service. If not, then you will not receive anything. And then he says something like asking that, look at this the situation in Hatay. Did Hatay receive any service? Implying that, I mean, since the local government actually run by the opposition, we didn't really care much about the basic needs of this people in this area. So this and the second one, it was about a video about pedestrian crossings in Turkey. So this was really interesting, actually. So they were waiting actually to pass to use this pedestrian crossings, and the cars were not stopping. And then the last minute, one of the cars stopped, and then the other the I think it was a public public transportation bus just hit the car, immediately stopping like at the crossing. So I mean, when we look at I want to start with this because I want to ask the audience that, okay, if there are many common elements in both these videos, but one of them, one common element in these two video clips is that informal institutions. I mean, they are totally unrelated. I know one of them is from political arena, the other one is from social life, but actually it's all about informal institutions. The first one is all about vote buying or patronage or clientelism, very famous terms, right, in political science. The second one is actually informal regulation of pedestrian crossings, like how those, which is also an example in the book, actually, how informal rules and understandings actually totally replaced formal rules, and then just suggesting that, I mean, actually informal institutions are very prevalent, and they play the huge role not only in social life but also in political life. So that was sort of the starting point of this project. I mean, if they are so common, why we have, especially in the Turkish case, we will talk about this later, why we have few institutional studies of these informal institutions. So that was the starting point. So this project basically introduces a conceptual and theoretical framework of informal institutions. And also I tried to illustrate them. I tried to illustrate the conceptual theoretical points by in-depth analysis of 4 cases of institutions deriving from Turkish socio-political life. So these are some of the guiding questions. So why and how do informal institutions emerge? How do informal institutions matter? What roles do they play, right, in socio-political life? How can we classify them? What novel types of informal institutions can we identify in addition to the ones that we have in the literature? How do informal institutions interact with formal institutions? And how do they shape formal institutional rules, mechanisms, and outcomes? And finally, how do they change, right? And to continue, okay, so these are just some definitional issues, but maybe I can briefly define just informal institutions, so to save time. So they are basically socialist shared rules. By the way, I just borrowed the canonical definition, very popular one in the literature. They are just socialist shared rules, usually unwritten, that are created, communicated, and enforced outside of officially sanctioned channels. And you can imagine so many types, like from honor killing to clientelism, which is the case in the video clip, nepotism, patrimonialism, black market, so many. Okay, right. And this is just a comparison, but let's just say move. Okay, so basically, like just to, I will not really go into details, but maybe I can talk a little bit about the theoretical framework. So in this study, I utilize typological theorizing. Basically, it refers to the development of contingent generalizations about combinations or configurations of variables that constitute theoretical types. They are, I mean, especially George and Bennett, especially like the Andrew Bennett, I mean, promote these in recent years. That I think they are very useful to advance our understanding of multifaceted and complex social or political phenomena. And in this study, I tried to provide a novel and multidimensional typology of informal institutions. Already, actually, in the literature, we have so many so many typological analysis, but I think they are limited. They are, first of all, they are most of them are two-dimensional and they are underspecified and so partial. If I may just illustrate the limitations of the existing typological accounts, we can just utilize a very famous, very popular typology by Henke and Levitsky, 2004. Basically, it's just a two-dimensional typology based on informal institutions' functional relations with formal institutions. So they have two dimensions. All about basically the degree to which formal and informal institutional outcomes converge or diverge. B, the effectiveness of the effectiveness of the relevant formal institutions. So basically, it refers to the extent to which formal rules and regulations shape behavior. It's all about basically compliance. So if people comply, it's effective. If not, ineffective. So based on this 2x2 analysis, so they have like 4 very popular types of informal institutions. And then these are like some definitions. So why I think they are limited? If we continue with this example, well, when we look at their typology, the main dimension of that typology, institutional effectiveness, it refers to institutional enforcement and compliance, right? And in theory, the actors might basically follow the existing formal rules and regulations based on 2 factors. So either because of a cost-benefit calculus, right? More like the rationalist perspective, or because they consider the existing formal rules as legitimate and they just basically follow, right? More normative perspective. But interestingly, Henke and Levitsky, they did not really discuss or mention any of those distinct dynamics or sources of institutional compliance. Rather, they just treat compliance as a matter of utilitarian cost-benefit assessment, because people comply with formal institutions to achieve some benefits or to avoid possible sanctions in case of rule violation. More like symbolic factors, especially legitimacy, I think is ignored, because we cannot assume that high degree of compliance would be an indicator of high degree of approval or legitimacy. No, because in authoritarian regimes, for instance, people might comply with rules and regulations, but that doesn't mean that those formal rules and regulations would enjoy substantial popularity and approval in the eyes of people. Okay? But then why legitimacy matters? I think it matters because it matters not only for formal institutional performance and effectiveness, but I think it also matters for actors' need and search for alternative arrangements. I mean, if people think that, okay, existing regulations are illegitimate or limited in terms of legitimacy, then that would provide incentives for individuals to actually to come up with alternative mechanisms to achieve their certain objectives. For instance, we can talk more about that. For instance, this religious wedding in Turkish case. So that's why I introduced this 3-dimensional typology. Basically, I have 1 dimension about legitimacy, whether formal institutions are legitimate or illegitimate, and then more utilitarian perspective, whether they are beneficial or non-beneficial. In Q&A session, I would be happy to talk more about these. And then the 3rd dimension, institutional logic. Whether the logic of formal and informal institutions are concordant or discordant. And that generates, this multidimensional typology obviously includes those 4 classical types, but it also generates 4 new types, I think. then I label them as, and if you notice them, they are mostly, they are likely to appear in cases where formal institutions enjoy limited legitimacy in the eyes of actors. So we have basically two concordant type, symbiotic and superseding, and two discordant type, two novel discordant types, layered, and I call them layered and subversive. If I may just briefly describe them, and then maybe before going into the empirical details, in case of symbiotic institutions, we see a mutually beneficial relationship between formal and informal institutions. They might enhance each other's effectiveness or legitimacy, and therefore they are likely to reinforce each other. So you might think of them as the different sides of the same coin. In case of superseding, well, they are likely to emerge, more likely to emerge when both formal institutional utility and legitimacy are very low. For various reasons, agents may find the existing formal rules, harmful for their self-interest, or they may also consider that, in addition to that, they may consider them as illegitimate. And under those conditions, they are likely to resort to informal institutions which will supersede or transcend weak formal rules and regulations. And over time, they can gradually and peacefully surpass and so completely replace formal institutions. I utilize the case of gem courts in the Turkish setting to illustrate this type. The first one is the religious wedding. Symbiotic, I treat it as a symbiotic informal institution. Gem courts as a superseding. And then we have two discordant types, layered, I call layered and subversive. Layered is, here in this case, agents actually follow formal rules and regulations, but they do not necessarily accept or consider them as legitimate, rightful, and just. And but they might fail to amend them, and as in that case, they might set up or resort to relatively more legitimate informal institutions, informally operating next to the existing formal rules and regulations. Hence, I use the term layered. So although these institutions operate alongside the existing formal institutions, there is actually implicit or explicit tension between those two. And in the book, I use religious minority holidays as an, I think, illustrative case of layered informal institution. For subversive, this is quite unique than those three. They emerge as a result of non-beneficial and illegitimate formal institutions, or when actors consider existing formal bodies as non-beneficial and illegitimate. So they are highly contentious, destructive, and sometimes seditionist, or apparently with diverging logic, institutional logic and rational. And here, agents use these kind of institutions to actually weaken, to subvert, to fight against the existing rules and regulations. And in the Turkish case, in the book, I use multilingual municipalism, çok dilli belediyecilik, as a quite illustrative case of subversive informal institutions. Okay, so I have also some discussions of how much time I have. I want to save because time for discussions and.
Hocam, indeed, you have a couple of minutes left. It would be better. Yes, it would be better if you could wrap it up within 5 minutes, maybe.
All right, great. The book also discusses the question of when do these institutions emerge? I mean, the literature already accounted the many of them, but I emphasize legitimacy needs in this book as one source of one factor facilitating the rise of informal institutions. And also we also see several other mechanisms, more decentralized, unintended or spontaneous processes also constituting as the source of informal institutional emergence, like habituation and unintended consequences of dramatic changes. I would be happy to talk about them later. Regarding change, so we can just skip this part because, now case selection. Why Turkey and why those cases? I think the Turkish case is a great theory building case, I think, because of two important aspects of this particular setting. First, the weakness of formal institutional arrangements. So we can come up with many examples of them. I mean, anayasayı bir kez delmekle bir şey olmaz, like the typical example, you know that, right? And in addition to that, we see the abundance of strong and influential informal rules and regulations, so-called yazılı olmayan kurallar, right? Like not only in social but also in political sphere. So I thought it's a very the typical case highly valuable in terms of generating and or building novel hypotheses or theories, or to improve the existing ones. So that's why I decided to focus on the Turkish case. Data regarding data sources, I have focus groups for especially for the religious wedding chapter. Interviews in almost all chapters, like with many actors, public opinion surveys, election data, textual analysis, so many, like across all those chapters. So yeah, this is just a summary basically. So I have religious marriage as a case, chapter 1, empirical chapter 1 as a symbiotic case, concordant. It's a majority institution in the area of family and marriage. So I have jam courts, but this time a religious minority institution, but concordant as well, conflict resolution, and as a proceeding institution. But be careful here because it was a proceeding, but then after modernization process and migration, I think now in contemporary era, it fits to Levitsky's complementary type better than the proceeding right now, as of in contemporary Turkey. And then I have layered institutional case of layered institution religious minority. This is a religious minority, and then multilingual municipalism again as a subversive one, again a minority institution. If you notice here, like many of them are actually by minority groups, ethnic or religious minorities, but one of them is by majority. This is not surprising because especially if formal rules and regulations are restrictive or exclusionary vis-a-vis certain ethnic religious identities, then that actually encourages these groups to actually come up with informal arrangements, informal settings, informal arrangements, informal rules and regulations to basically either to challenge the formal rules or to bypass formal rules or just to solve their like certain community needs or to achieve certain community objectives, ethnic or religious, doesn't matter. So that's why this distribution is it's not just random, it makes sense why we have so many cases from minority groups. So yeah, I mean, okay, I will not really go into the details, but I think I would be happy to stop here, Buğra, if you're fine.
Sure, excellent.
Because the book is already there, and I would be happy to hear comments and questions, because there is this possibility to have a new study about this time an edited volume. I mean, using more or less the same theoretical and conceptual framework as the theory chapter, but having individual chapters, empirical cases from like South Asia, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. So maybe I might benefit from questions, comments for future plans. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hocam. And then I imagine that summarizing a book, within 15 minutes should be a very hard task. That's why, you did a great job, despite all these, how to say, challenges. Then I'd like to turn to our discussions. Firstly, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Şebnem Yardimci-Geyikçi. Şebnem Hocam, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I should have read this book years ago, but I couldn't. But now I'm so happy to have a chance to read it. And I have to say that I really enjoyed reading as well, because sometimes it's also difficult to follow these kind of books, but that was not the case for Zeki Hocam's book. And I would say like it was a very interesting one and easy to follow. So it's a great pleasure that I stand here today. As I said, this is a remarkable work in many respects. Like not only it's because of its contribution to the general area of comparative politics, but more specifically to our understanding of informal institutions. And because it also enhances our comprehension of the interplay between state and society, offering a fresh perspective that integrates particularly the concept of legitimacy into the typology of informal institutions and provides a multidimensional typology, which I found it also very useful. The book has innovative examples, and this is coupled with a methodological diversity that makes the contribution all the more stronger. And I would say it enhances the literature in ways previously unexplored. And I also like the way that Zeki Hoca merged rational choice and normative interpretative approaches to dissect the types of informal institutions. So overall, I would say the book is an important contribution to academic discourse on informal institutions. Furthermore, it emphasized on the factors that lead to the emergence and evolution of informal institutions, be it through the inadequacies or transformations of the formal structures or their inherent oppressiveness. These are both compelling and instructive. This institutional lens, I would say, provides a structured framework that greatly enhances our understanding of why informal institutions arise. Even more, the book also offers an explanation of why informal institutions change. So overall, I found several points groundbreaking. So, however, as a discussant, also I have some points to make. First, while I was observing all these informative insights, something interesting caught my attention. The book does an incredible job of discussing the emergence and evolution of informal institutions through what I would call an institutional lens. So what I meant is that it looks at how these institutions emerge as a response to the shortcomings or transformations of the formal ones, or like the legitimacy crisis of the formal ones. And I think this perspective is crucial. And it is also important to see how failures, rigidity, or even the oppressiveness of formal institutions can lead to the birth of informal ones. Yet, I couldn't help but think about the cultural side of the story. So Zeki Hoca has just mentioned towards the end of presentation, but that discussion is mostly missing in the book. So while the book captures the institutional dynamics, it appears that the diverse manifestations of informal institutions across various societies may not solely be attributed to the shortcomings or transformations of formal institutions, but they are also deeply intertwined with cultural practices and identities. This is actually demonstrated by the very examples the book adopts. So the book already employs the examples that comes from the cultural differences, either to be religious identity or ethnic identity. So I would say, with the exception of religious marriage, which is an example for symbiotic typology of informal institutions, all examples are resulted from either religious or ethnic identity differences. And even for the religious marriage, two of the key explanatory factors are religiosity and ethnic identity. So this perspective makes me think that the book might also suggest that in societies where official identity diverges from the social identity that you have just mentioned towards the end of your presentation, or within social structures that are characterized by multiple religious or ethnic identities, informal institutions not only emerge, but they also flourish. So the likelihood of emergence of informal institutions seems to be related, or this likelihood is higher in multi-religious, multi-ethnic societies. So I would say this might also allow the multi-dimensional typology provided here to travel across the cases. And I think maybe with the new book, this factor might be emphasized more. And secondly, but I mean, I have to say that I see that institutional explanation is solid, but a cultural lens might actually uncover even more about, for instance, the resilience or the acceptance of these informal institutions. And that might give us a fuller maybe picture of their significance and endurance in many different cases. So like for me, like this culturally, while discussing the factors behind the emergence of these informal institutions, the emphasis on cultural factors was seems to be missing. Like they were there in between the lines, particularly when you are discussing the cases. And in after each case, there's a long discussion on the implications and what are the why this case is important and what it explains. There, in between the lines, we see emphasis on cultural factors, but these cultural factors are not discussed where you actually provided the discussion over the factors that explain the emergence of informal institutions. What else? Secondly, I might say this is already highlighted in the section on feature research. And I also find it important that like how informal, the question of how informal institutions are formalized, or we can also say how informal institutions become institutionalized, particularly within authoritarian contexts. This is, I would say, is to be paramount importance. And like this is actually stated as a feature research, but maybe in the book this might be underlined more, because this type of research question is, I would say, is also gaining relevance, especially in the context like Turkey, where the functions of institutions are progressively diminishing. So I would say like the how they are formalized, how they are institutionalized, and the institutionalization of informal institutions, I would say, is an interesting topic to have more research on. So overall, as I said, I'm really impressed by the book, by the cases, by its coverage, by the examples. And I had to find something as a discussant. These are the 2 points that I found. And so, as I said, this book stands as an important contribution that explores the often overlooked aspects of informal institutions. I myself, as someone who focuses on a formal institution, political parties, party systems, I also find it all the more interesting. And yes, I'm happy to be here, to have the opportunity to engage with this work, and look forward to the continued exploration of informal institutions guided by this theoretical framework provided by this well-written book.
Thank you very much, Şebnem Hocam. I'd like to turn to our second discussant, Dr. Soyaltin Colella. Digdem Hocam, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Buğra. Thank you, Zeki Hocam. Great book. Some of my points I already covered, so I will try to be more quick, and I want to give floor to our audience as well. But I want to mention something, and I put in parentheses, wow. Methodologic, empirically, this book is very rich, you know. Zeki Hoca passed very fast, but there are 80 interviews, and there are fascinating names, you know, with religious leaders, you know, ethnic and Alevi dedes, and very, very rich range. So it's really impressive. 7 focus groups and a survey, including 7,000 participants. So I guess you are a solid, very solid evidence showing what you have, these 4 cases. I definitely should have, you know, forcing myself to find a but. I think I have a couple of questions, maybe for clarification. Maybe I'm not, you know, captured very properly. And a couple of points, maybe push you maybe where you can go from here. I guess there is many things that you can go after this book. My first point, I guess, I was just reading these 4 cases and I'm trying to understand, you know, what can be other examples. Maybe you have 4, more than 4, but you have this nice typology. And sometimes it's a straitjacket, you know, this kind of typologies are very nice, help you to theorize. But you have to put 1 in each or 2 in each, and we don't know the rest. So the other vague gray zone of informal and formal, you know, where they interact. So I was thinking, when we call an informal practice an informal institution, when they become, you know, part of the habitual behavior, as you mentioned in page somewhere 40. So when they turn into an informal institution, so when an informal, when I see informal institution walking on the street, how come I recognize it? So that was the first question in my mind. And the second one, I guess, related with that one, the other cases in your mind. Do you have any other? You just cut yourself with 4 just to fit in this typology? Because somewhere in the book, when you are talking about drastic change, how change can lead emergence of informal institutions like civil marriage. You talk about religious marriage. You talk about, the Ottoman Empire, Qadi justice, how it was an effectively working institution already, but with, top-down secularist, Kemalist reforms abolish it, and created a new structure. And informal institution didn't go away, but, just going hand in hand with the formal one in a symbiotic way. So I was just thinking maybe today's Turkish bureaucracy, even from Tazminat, I guess, this adab tradition, Islamic tradition, this professionalism came across with Tazminat reforms. And since then, I guess there is this symbiotic relationship going on. So maybe you don't call it in that way, but this kind of hybridity. I mean, I called in one of my papers like neo-patrimonialism, borrowing some civil service reforms, Weberian type, but not necessarily fitting in this Weberian script, getting some patrimonial, I don't know what you call it, legacy coming from the Ottoman heritage maybe, and not really turning totally into a formal structure, but keeping this informal core at the heart. So I was thinking, do you think this is a symbiotic relationship or another form? I have some other examples in my mind, but maybe they are funny things, but, just Fridays, prayings in bureaucracy, not compulsory, but, ways of doing things, especially in today's Turkey, especially for some bureaucrats, going to Friday prayings, or some ceremonies for newborns. A bit today's world, they look like a bit Christian traditions in Turkish case, Mevlüt. I was thinking maybe they are also informal practices that can fit in one of these boxes that you have. Or maybe these are new trends, and I feel like there will be no new trends coupled with modernization. Turkey is becoming more multi-ethnic with, different ethnic backgrounds, refugees, migrants. Maybe there will be more informal boxes, not necessarily fitting in your 4 typology, but maybe you will add more because it is really becoming more ethnically, pluralist society, which may bring new informal institutions. I have 2 more points. I guess my question already replied in the book, but I still want to put it, and you already mentioned in a maybe follow-up book, bringing different evidence from different countries. So do you think your typology will travel to other countries, other settings, and how it will change? So you talk about this can apply to Global South, and you gave a couple of examples. I guess Helme and Levitsky's, they use it for Latin American cases. You give evidence from Russia and China in the book. And I was thinking, do you think this typology just fits to Global Southern countries or Muslim majority countries or multi-ethnic countries? Maybe, there will be some other insights from different countries, but your typology, I guess, can be applied in different cases, and how. The third point is another dramatic change, maybe the authoritarianism going on in Turkish case. Maybe you can use this typology for authoritarian settings. This can be another comparison, another way to compare countries. So I want to push you a bit, include the regime type in the analysis. So this typology may not work maybe for, more democratically established settings, which is rare in today's world. We see authoritarianism in many parts of the world, even in the consolidated democracies. But I guess I feel like even formal institutions are being contested today, right? Hierarchy of the courts, rule of law. In Turkish case, constitutional court decisions are being questioned. And you already mentioned in the book, religionizing the formal civil marriage. So civil marriage is also becoming contested by formal practices. So they are really, I guess, intertwined with each other. So I'm feeling like informal zone is a bit growing, covering the formal part, not in the symbiotic parts, but maybe in the other typological varieties. And maybe this is related with the authoritarianism. So do you see a correlation? That's my question with, rising authoritarianism, especially with the drastic change, as you call it, presidential regime, maybe, and, rising informal practices. In this religious marriage, you correlate with ideology, and you say this is not really explaining why people are still supporting religious marriage plus formal marriage. And you look at left and right, but I'm not so sure this is the cleavage in Turkish politics today, really. So what about, libertarian, authoritarian cleavage, like, the one that are being used in European politics, Tangal? Maybe this can a bit better explain how, formal marriage or informal marriage is, religious marriage is more accepted by authoritarian populations, part of the society. So I'm just thinking, maybe there is this kind of correlation between rising authoritarianism and more informal practices in the society, but not necessarily for other types. For example, religious, multilingual municipalism. So if we have a less suppressive, more pluralistic, more libertarian approach in the government, I guess there will be already a formal zone, right, for this kind of ethnic municipality, like ethnic language, multi-language municipality. We don't need an informal institution for that. So then it's the other way around, the more liberal government, less informal needs. So I was just, trying to push a bit in that direction. What is the connection with, authoritarian practices going on in Turkish Republic? I also see in the presidential regime, we see formal decrees, presidential decrees, but also we see some informality going on. This obedience, commitment, loyalty are becoming, quite important in inner decision-making circles, the small circles, presidential, in the formal structure of the presidential regime, this, consultation chambers of the president. And mostly they are, I guess, some mind-likely, friends. So I guess there are also some informality going on, and maybe this can be another example. I guess my final point is a question, a question for you as an institutionalist scholar. Where do you see yourself? Because when we are looking at informal institutions, that's how I felt, and I also already questioned.
I'm not sure if I consider myself institutionalist, but go ahead.
Okay, that's another point. But when I was reading these 4 cases, religious marriage, gem courts, I was thinking, I guess we are seeing informal institutions as inferior than the formal ones in terms of effectiveness, legitimacy, or we think Weberian bureaucracy will work better. Maybe it's another Eurocentric sort of infusion in the institutionalist research. So when we look at Ottoman Empire, for example, so if you look from a Weberian perspective, it's an ineffective patrimonial regime type, right? But many scholars, Inal Koca, for example, he was saying, it has its own system working well. There are religious authorities sort of controlling sultan's arbitrary rule. So I guess it is, this kind of Eurocentric literature is also, pushing us in that way, seeing informal institutions as inferior, especially in Muslim societies, maybe, or global South societies. Let's say informal institutions not really work well. And there are many other. I have some friends doing something similar. How in Bangladesh Sharia courts are working well for women. Or some other, informal settings are opening more pluralistic options for people who are marginalized. But if you look from a Western perspective, Eurocentric perspective, I guess it is not the way around. So how do you see yourself, working on gem courts, an alternative dispute resolution mechanism? Do you think this will decolonize the Western, kind of hegemonic situation in the institutionalist research? All these people you heard sort of cited, if I put them geographically, I guess they are mostly North American, European, right? So not rarely global South or African or Latin American. So how do you locate yourself in this kind of debate, decolonizing Western-oriented institutionalist research? I guess there's a very thin line here. You can end up in the dark side of informal institutions. So many patronage, favoritism, corruption can be justified by, under the banner of culture, local tradition, and it can open this kind of dark rooms, I'm aware. But I guess there is room for decolonizing the research, especially if you underline this kind of informal institutions may work well, better than formal ones in some situations, as you did in the book. So I'm just curious, where do you see yourself in the decolonizing trend that we are all going through in these days in the academia? I think that's all from my side. Maybe we'll come back with more questions.
Sure. Thank you, Digdem Hocam. Thank you very much for your comments. Zeki Hocam, you have 5 minutes to address probably some of the comments that
5 minutes.
if possible, the floor is yours.
I cannot answer like the whole, like all day long. Well, going back to start with Şebnem Yardimci-Geyikçi's comments. So, Hocam, thank you very much for your close and careful reading of the book. Yeah, the cultural side important. You're right. And especially, I like your point that what like this expectation that, I mean, should we expect more informal institutions in multi-religious, multi-ethnic cultural settings? Maybe, maybe not, but maybe, because that depends on whether formal arrangements are actually representative of all those cultural identities. If not, then we would still see so many informal institutions. But even in, let's say that the formal institutions in a very heterogeneous social setting are highly inclusionary towards those identities, then probably we wouldn't expect to see like so many vibrant and powerful informal institutions. I think it depends on the again, whether we have the restrictive or inclusionary formal institutions. But that's an important point. I think more theorizing, I think, necessary on this issue. And regarding formalization, I mean that would be also great. I mean, like how and why, under what conditions an informal arrangement become a formal arrangement? Why state embraces informal practice, informal rule? I think that we need more, I think, and I'm hoping to have some in future works, some research projects actually on this, like why things are formalized, why the modern states move certain informal arrangements to formal arena by legalizing, by codifying them. I think that's we need a lot actually to do that. That's why in the final chapter I discussed that we need to do more work on that. So I'm very grateful for these two major points. And also Digdem's comments. Hocam, thank you very much. So many comments actually. So I like so many. I'm glad to hear that, because I mean your questions are actually suggesting that, I mean, well, for all of us, for myself and for others who are interested in informal institutions, there is still a lot to do, I think. And especially like I never thought in this way. I like your comments about how these reinvention of Ottoman traditions, right, in bureaucracy or in socio-political life. That's a good one, because, but again, I think we should look at their functional relations with the existing secular, let's say, secular or republican formal rules and regulations. In some cases, probably this reinvention or re-emergence or revivalism of this neo-Ottomanist perspectives, I mean, reviving these Ottoman traditions or practices, maybe is just to challenge the existing republican arrangements. So they might be actually operating as more subversive, or in some cases, they might be just operating along line with the existing formal secular republican arrangements. In that case, they would be layered, more layered type, but depending on whether they are discordant or concordant. So I think that's, but still that means that, I mean, I like this point because that provides new perspective. I mean, so we have a government, right, with 20 years, with increasingly Islamist orientations, with this neo-Ottomanist appeal. How actually that affects informal institutions in secular republican formal polity? I think there's a lot to do in that. I think maybe we might have specific research about like bureaucracy, or about, I don't know, education or judiciary, or some other formal bodies. So yeah, that's interesting, I thought. These apply only to global? No, probably no, never. I mean, I never implied that. It's just why I gave those examples, because in these settings, I mean, we have so many formal rules and regulations, so it's easy to find cases. But definitely, the typology might also travel. I think to advanced Western settings as well. I think I never thought that this is just apply the basically engages dialogue with the global south. I never thought in that way. But yeah, we can come up with several examples like subversive. Maybe there might be new social movements in Western settings challenging the established formal bodies. Like there might be those like marginal groups, like even in Western settings. So we might also look at that. I mean, regime type and informal institutions. I don't know how to comment about that. Buğra will not give me enough time. But regarding religious marriage and authoritarianism, I don't think so, because I mean, the 80%, almost like more than 80%, close to 90% of society practicing this. So that just 10% is the illiberal. And then that 90 or 90% illiberal. I don't think that we can make such a classification. I mean, regarding, for instance, like what this goes to Şebnem's point as well. Like, what if we have a democratic government then accommodating this multilingual municipalism? Yeah, that would be the formalization of an informal arrangement. If that happens, I don't know, but it would be interesting to look at. But regarding authoritarianism, regime type, and its relationship with informal state politics. I like you had an interesting point. You said that, do we have like informal state politics expanding in this authoritarian setting? Well, I don't know. Like, it's difficult to measure, but I cannot claim that, I mean, in democratic polities, we don't have informal politics. I think informal politics applies to all types of regimes. But if autocratic incumbents, they like to run things informally better, like they have such a preference, maybe, I don't know. I didn't think about that way. Plausible.
Thank you. Thank you, Zeki Hocam. I'm now checking the time. We have 10 minutes left in the remainder of the session. I'd like to turn to the participants.